Good afternoon. This is Felicity, and I'm speaking to you from my library. And this afternoon, I have a relatively brief video on a relatively large number of books. That is what I'm currently reading, what I'm currently not reading very fast, and in a response to a very lovely video that Mark at Book Time for Elvis did on how many books do you read at one time. So the short answer is 8 books, and 10 that I'm reading not quite so currently. There you go. I have an explanation for that, and it will become very clear when you see the books that I have on my stack why. Most of the books on my stack right now are essays, short stories, or poetry, which definitely lends itself to reading lots of books at one time. Anyway, here they are. Oh, and I have different places in my house, which is a library, that have different little stacks of books at them, and when I am at that place in my house, those are the books that I read. So, for example, here are the first two. When I'm sitting on my stationary bike doing that really boring thing, which is bicycling in place for health, I amuse myself by reading. And the 2 books that I'm currently reading that are on my bicycle shelf are these. Currently the 3rd volume of the Essays of Montaigne, working my way through very slowly now for almost a little over a year. And there are 3 volumes of the actual essays and 1 of the explanations and notes. And again, this is just such a pretty volume. This is the Limited Editions Club, 1946, in perfect condition, in the box, semi-leather bound. So nice, really so nice. And I read a little bit. And when I'm not reading this one, currently I'm reading a rather somewhat barrel tell-all essay called Uncertain Verses of Virgil. You wouldn't think, but it's actually about sex life. There you go. Montaigne doesn't let anything get by him. He's really a very interesting writer for some dude that lived in the 16th century. Very interesting dude. So Montaigne's on one side, and then I have, when I don't feel like reading an essay by Montaigne, I currently have what is now the 8th volume in a 10-volume set of poetry, published in 1932, and consisting of poets that were certainly born before then, but hadn't quite, actually so many of them had died, but that had begun producing poetry by 1932. So it's a curated collection, quite large. And for example, the poems that I just got through were a handful from William Morris. So I get some poets that I think, well, maybe they should have stayed buried. There'd be 1 or 2, and I think, well, that was kind of sentimental. That was kind of a little odd. But on the other hand, there are some poets that I would never have run into. For example, William Morris. I know his artwork. I know his creative production in the handmaking line. I know his novels and I know his essays, but I didn't know his poetry, and that was really interesting. So there you go. There's 2 books that live by the side of the bicycle on a bookshelf there, and when I am bicycling, I read one of those too. Oh. So then there are the books on the bedside. Everybody has them. Well, I have 3 right now. These are the ones that are by the bedside. This is The Travels in Alaska by John Muir, which is a wonderful look. This is nearer the end of his life, and it covers a couple decades of his travels when Alaska was already becoming mutated. It was already becoming modified, polluted, changed, but was still very, very close to its original state, and John Muir triumphs in that. John Muir was an original. He could just go off at a drop of a hat pin. He was a kindly man, but didn't take kindly to people who despoiled the environment. And he writes about his travels in the natural environment, and amongst Inuit, and amongst the white people that went up to do whatever it is they were going to do. But it is a really beautiful book, and it is worth reading. And this one was going pretty fast until it got slowed down because I picked up this one. And so John Muir is slowed down because I'm rereading Jorge Luis Borges, and this is fictions. And I've read many of them, but clearly I hadn't read all of them. And I am kind of racing through this guy here. I will probably go back to John Muir again when this one is finished. But I am very, very much enjoying reading these, and at a somewhat more mature age, being reintroduced to the labyrinth that was in Borges' mind. Fascinating. The third book that is currently on the bedside table is, I actually did this one, I read from this one, I think, yesterday, and that was one of Dunsany's essays. And this is The Ghosts of the Heaviside Layer and Other Phantasms, and yeah, they're gorgeous. The stories at the beginning, there's one, the beginning one is actually pretty fun. It's called The Ghosts. And the guy buys this old house, and he doesn't really believe in them, and he tries to exorcise the ghosts, and some guy comes up with a machine to exorcise them, and it kind of does something, and then they all came back and protested in no uncertain words. And at the end, he takes care of the ghost problem. But he has his friend back who had come up with a machine that was supposed to exorcise all the ghosts. And he said, I want you to promise one thing, he said to Glade. Yes, said Glade. I want you to promise, said Nietzscheans, never to say a word about this to anyone. Well, yes, replied Glade, but it's a pity. I'd have liked to talk it over with one or two men. It's interesting. Well, not for a few weeks, said Nietzscheans. Will you promise me? Very well, said Glade, if you like. Why? Nietzscheans glanced for a moment up at the high rafters. Because I was thinking of selling the place, he said. Oh, Dunsany's great. All right, so then let's just say, okay, I'm going to go to another part of my house where there are, this is the library, the one that I'm in right now, and I have all of my books there. I have a whole bunch of other books, and some of them, of course, the last stack is what I'm currently kind of like reading, not reading. But the ones that are on my active list in the library right now are this absolute delight, which is The Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell in conversation with Bill Moyers, and it's a treat. It's really great. Now I understand that of course these do exist as an audio-visual thing, which sounds fascinating, sounds great, but I usually prefer the book. It's just me. But I'm reading this. It's about half done, and enjoying it very much. So every time I come down to the library and I'm sitting in my comfortable chair, this is the one I pick up first. And then I have, this is one that came up in the context of my desert island conversation with Sean at Sean D. Standfast, and this is one of my desert island books. And so I have decided that, well, I don't know if I'll ever get stranded on a desert island, but I can start reading all of the lives, and so I am from the beginning. I've reached Lycurgus, which was kind of interesting because he's the lawmaker for Sparta, and Plutarch is pretty sympathetic. He's telling all the stories and tales that he knows, and he tells each significant, notable person in some detail, first a Greek, and then a Roman, and then he compares them. This is going to be a comparison between Lycurgus and Numa, one of the kings of Rome. And we'll see, because I'm just coming to the end of Lycurgus, and I'm thinking, how is he going to match him up? This guy's a pretty interesting dude, and fairly. I mean, he was not called a just man for nothing. He sounds like he really had it together, even if it was making the laws of Sparta, which, well, there you are. So I am reading Plutarch end to end, and because each of the lives is not very long, it lends itself to episodic reading. We'll call it episodic, shall we, and not scattershot? Anyway, there you go. So Plutarch's lives. And the other one that is currently on this is a 2-volume set. This is one of the ones that I picked up at my beautiful antiquarian bookseller, which is On the Ease of the World, which is the travels of Reginald Farrar in China in the early 20s, or mid-20s. Spent 2 years there. He's a botanist. So the book's this fantastical combination of travel log, of travel woes and joys, mixed intimately with botanical discussions, which of course I know nothing about at all except their plants and their green and colors and so forth. But he's passionate about plants. He's not just like a botanist going like, you know, this piece comes here and this piece comes there. He's gets super excited about them, and so he sees a rare plant in its native environment, and he gets very, very excited, and he tells you just the same way as you'd say, oh, I saw, you know, something that you're passionate about, whatever that is, and you'll never believe I saw the book, and it was the book I'd always been looking for, and there it was on the shelves. It was a first edition. It was perfect, and I got it. Yeah, well, so there you go. So Farrar is there doing the same thing for plants, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So there you go. Those are my 8 books that I'm actually fairly actively reading, because I may not read absolutely every one every day, but they kind of go in some kind of rotation. So then I have one book which I just started today because I just found a wonderful channel by somebody named Tom L.A. Books. Now you probably go like, oh, we have known about him for ages. And he has most of his videos are on the classics of Italian literature. Well, what's not to like? Read Dante, read it a couple times. Probably not the same edition, English edition. Probably there's plenty more modern, better ones, but was definitely something that stuck in my mind a lot. And I have an edition that has the illustrations by Dore, which is pretty nice too. But the one I always go back to the beginning, and one of the very early video episodes that he did was on The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. And I've had it in my library for a while because I read somewhere, oh, this is an interesting book, you will like it. And I don't know why I didn't start it. Maybe it was because it mentioned, oh, this is about Garibaldi. And I thought, well, do I care about Garibaldi? I don't know. Anyway, so this is one which I have just begun. I read the preface and forward, and I'm just about to get started on. So this is going to be a new one that I'm adding. We'll see how far I get before it gets backburnered, or not, because in the midst of the 8 books that I'm currently reading fairly regularly, there were 3 or 4 that just kind of, well, maybe 5 or 6 that kind of whizzed by. There was the ones that I was reading while I was laid up, which just zipped by, like the Ogden Nash and the I think I did an earlier video on them. The Faulkner, the Richter, a couple of other ones. Oh yeah, the Robert Service, and also an uncommon reader, and a book of the short episodes of Dorothy Sayers on Peter Wimsey, and something else that I've forgotten now. Just kind of rereads, just something just whizzed by, and just kind of stuck them in there, and it was just like a couple hours reading. So these things do happen in the midst of all of my long-term reading. So now I have a stack of, I'm reading them, and they kind of have been kind of backburnered for various reasons. Well, you will see. So the first one is, this is one that I've been reading for quite a while. This is one that my son lent me, The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, and it's a very interesting and very well written book on the revolution in Haiti and the story of Toussaint Louverture. It's a very good history, but it's very hard to read because it is a difficult story to tell. Glorious, but difficult. And of course, it doesn't end well for Toussaint Louverture, but it shows the grandeur of his life. And I periodically will pick that up. It's also not a style that I'm completely comfortable with, just because of the kinds of things I usually read, but it's quite okay to read things out of my comfort zone. It'd be good if I finished it, though. 2 that I recently got that are going to be going slower because, well, first of all, they're poetry. Second of all, because I'm really trying to savor them. One is this absolutely wonderful book of poetry, the last volume of Robert Frost in The Clearing, that was published before he died. And I am enjoying that. That's probably actually, as soon as one of the other ones is done, is probably going on my more immediate list. Also, for the same reason, Sonnets and Other Poems by George Santayana, which is a different style. This is an earlier work. This is a very different style of writing. I do like poetry a lot, but I tend to enjoy it very much in collections where I read a little of one poet and a little of another poet, not so much reading the one poet all at the same time, which is why these two are kind of slow go right now. The other one, I should really finish this because this was hilarious. This is Stanislaw Lem's Imaginary Magnitude, and this is the book of prefaces and advertisements to books that do not exist and never did, and it's Lem at his best. But there you go. So many other books have keep interfering with it. What can I say? Another one, I finished the first one pretty lickety-split, but I have the second volume of M.R. James's ghost stories. This would be a good time to get it back up again. I barely started this one, and other things got in the way of it. But I truly enjoyed the first volume of his ghost stories that I read, and so I'm looking forward to this one. So I get to it eventually. It's yeah, not so immediate reading. The blue and the brown books, blue and brown books, very interesting, more accessible than I expected for somebody as erudite as Wittgenstein, but still when I'm reading it, I will read a bit and then I will start thinking, I need something to soothe my brain a little bit. Wow. So there you go. This is one which I'm partway through a Barth reader, edited by Susan Sontag. This is really great. Barth ranges from almost unreadable to me. This is very, very literate, very, very intellectual, to being pretty interesting. And I never know which one it's going to be, so I think I had arrived at one that was a little bit more intellectual than I was expecting. The next one doesn't really classify as kind of like on the back burner list, because I got Christine de Pizan because I really do want to read her this as a sampler. I had one of the other Through Composed books earlier on and enjoyed it a lot. And I just started it. Thought I'd give it a taste, and then other things got in the way. But this is, once I start this one again, this is going to go pretty quickly. So I have a feeling I need to finish one of those 8 first before I start on that one again. My ongoing Umberto Eco essay session, I have hundreds and hundreds yet to read, and this is the one that I had started in on. And again, it's a book of essays, and so it definitely can come and go. This is the one. This is the one where he is roaming through America, bemused and pondering on the wonder that is America. This is pretty good, actually. He's a great writer. The other one, actually, this one, I swear I'm not going to use actually so much. Sorry, guys. Anyway, this one for quite a while was sitting on the dining room table, which is when I was going to read at the dining room table. This is what I was going to read, but I kind of this got sidebarred, back burnered by having new knees, and so this has kind of been on my slow-go list for a while until I feel like reading this at the table again. So that's what this one was. Anyway, those are my 8 books that I'm reading, 10 books that I've backburnered, and 1 book that is going to be added to my probably romp through in a bit list. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.